So today is Thursday in the second week of Ordinary Time, and we are going to deepen on the passage, Mark chapter 3, verses 7 to 12. Mark 3, 7 to 12, which is the Gospel of today. And it's the episode where it's a kind of summary of how Jesus was doing all the healings. People were touching him, he was preaching, and it was so crowded that he had to get onto a boat in order to continue his teaching, speaking to the people so they wouldn't crush him, the Gospel says. And there's something interesting there as a comment, as a summary of all that is happening, is that the demons, when he would cast them out or when they saw him, they would say, "You are the Son of God." So Jesus would tell them not to say who he was or to reveal his deeper identity for various reasons that we might be able to deepen on later. But the point here is that they declared who he was. They knew his identity as Son of God, that he was not just a prophet or a teacher going around spreading the gospel, but he was God himself. So today, we are going to deepen more on the second aspect of this discourse on the Sabbath. So we have been saying that there are two parts of the Sabbath discourse. One is that the Sabbath is meant for man, not man for the Sabbath, for men and women, for people. So this was the first aspect where we said that the Christian community is a community where the only law, the ultimate law, is love. And this is the proof of authentic religiosity. Any authentic religion or religious practice is always directed to the good of people, to the good of relationships, to build a better society. And it never negates society, doesn't negate the world. Of course, there is always a contrast that religion does not always please society, but it's always for its good. As the soul, there's this image that the saints use, that the soul always loves the body and wants the best for the body, but the body doesn't always love the soul because it doesn't allow the body to have what it wants. But the soul is always concerned for the body, just as parents are always concerned for their children, even though children might not always be happy with the way that parents would discipline them or do what's good for them. So religion is somehow like that. Authentic religion is always for the good of people, for humanity, for the good of the world. And that's why the ultimate law in religion, when all things fail and you doubt about how practices are going on even in a Christian community, in your family, in these circles, go back to the ultimate law. It's love. Love for the person around you, for the persons around you, is the ultimate law in religious practices. If not, I would question how we are practicing, and I myself am practicing religion if it doesn't lead to love. So that was the first aspect that we were meditating about, that the Sabbath is meant for man and not man for the Sabbath. But today, with the declaration of the demon, we go a further step. When Jesus says, the Son of Man is Lord even on the Sabbath. So if we like, today we are going to see a step when we said a community whose only law is love. The Christian community, actually today we can say the law of the Christian community is Christ himself. It's a person. It's not an activity or a rule. So the whole function of Sabbath was to introduce us to Christ, to a very personal relationship with him. And in fact, if you remember Saint Teresa of Calcutta, or Mother Teresa as she used to be called, she always said the main question of our prayer should be, Jesus, what would you do if you were me? Jesus, what would you do if you were in my place? because He is the rule, He's the law. And sometimes that simplifies so much our faith. It's not just about what the commandments say, what the rules say, or what other people say, which is important, it's part of life. But at the end of the day, our deepest discernment of knowing what God wants is, Jesus, what do you say? So this is like a second step for us to understand the change of mindset that Jesus wants in our religious practice. It's not just about the rules and the laws and the norms or what we should do, but it's about what Christ is telling us in our hearts also, what He does, what He thinks, what He feels, and who He is for us as well. So today, the declaration is so funny, that it's the demons who are declaring it. And sometimes we as human beings, we don't see the spiritual realm, the spiritual realities. But when Jesus was casting out the demons, they were the ones who declared it. So this declaration, you are the Son of God. Jesus is God. He is the object of our worship, not the rules, not the commandments. Sometimes we might get lost in this and forget the essential, which is that personal relationship of worship to God. As we were saying in Romans 12, verse 1 to 2, for this week's reflection, St. Paul says, I urge you, brothers and sisters, remembering the mercies of God, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. And that is your sensible worship. So once again, it's this living relationship. It's about life. It's about offering my life as it is to God and asking Him what He sees and what He wants from me. So before we actually say, what would you do, Lord? It's about doing. What do you want from me? Many times the saints teach us to ask more about the identity of Christ. Who are you, Lord? Who are you? I invite you today, as a very simple form of prayer, to ask this question to Jesus. Jesus, who are you? Don't give any quick answers. Don't intellectualize it. Just listen. Listen to yourself asking that question. Who are you, Lord? Who are you, Lord, in the midst of my life? Who are you, Lord, in the midst of my joys, but also of my pains? Who are you, Lord, in the midst of the people around me, the realities that I see that they live? What do you have to say? Who are you in this world that I see and I live in? Who are you? And once again, I would be very happy just to remain in prayer with the question. Prayer doesn't mean that we always have to have answers, but sometimes remaining with the question gives us even greater depth to our prayer, greater depth to our faith. Remain with the question. Don't rush to look for the answers. In every religion, there's always standard answers, and there are answers that we have to find out for ourselves. So I would put it this way. We have teachings, catechism that we have learned. All this is part of religion. And some people would say that the other part of our faith life is spirituality. So we distinguish religion and spirituality. So an analogy for this would be like sports. If you like basketball, I like basketball. And in sports like basketball, there's a moment where you need to be trained, right? You are taught by the coach how to bounce the ball, how to dribble and bring the ball around with you, how to shoot at the basket, how to lay up, do a layup to the basket as well with the ball. So there are things that you have to keep on repeating, and the coach has to teach you every step of the way. But that is not the end of the story. Training is one part of it. Training is meant for the game. When you go to the game, You cannot just stick to the rules. You cannot just repeat things. And you have to be very creative with what you have learned. Now that for me is spirituality. Religion is like our training, the standard answers that the church gives us. And it's very important because if you don't learn the rules and the skills well, then you won't play the game well either. But if you learn the skills and the rules well, then when it comes to the game, you are able to apply them better. But remembering that the whole point of learning the rules and the skills is to play the game. So spirituality is like finding our own answers from God. And that is why in spirituality we encourage so much in prayer to ask questions. Ask God questions and let life give you the answers. Who are you, Lord? Are you the Son of God for me? As Son of God, what are you saying to this world? What are you doing in this world? Letting God give you those answers in your prayer is part of that spirituality that we would like to encourage. In other words, as what we are saying, when we say that the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath, it's about Him. It's about knowing Him more. It's about loving Him more. It's about following Him more closely and understanding why I do what I do for my faith. You know, one thing that the saints can teach us, and as we pray about being apostles, is this obsession for the person of Christ. This might sound very extreme, but at the end of the day, that's what sainthood, what being a serious Christian is about. It's being obsessed about Jesus. Why we keep going back to the Bible, why we reflect the same passages of the gospel when we have heard it hundreds of times, and yet we can still ask Jesus, what are you saying to me? What do you want? Who are you? Who am I for you? So all these questions remain the questions, is once again building up our spiritual lives, not forgetting religion once again, which is the law, the Sabbath, and all these things that we've been talking about. But what we want is our spiritual life. It's Christ. It's knowing Christ more. It's falling in love with Him even more as Son of God, as your God in your life, and being attracted to His lifestyle, His way of thinking, His way of feeling, and etc. So just a point of reflection I'd like to leave you with regarding this point about the law is not just love, the law is Christ Himself. And the point of reflection is this: there are many people who go to church who do not have a personal relationship with God. You will be surprised in the sense that they have never spoken to God. There are people I've met and have asked, and even people who know a lot about God who have never spoken to God. And my point of reflection for you is, do you talk to God? Do you yourself have a personal relationship with Him? Do you listen to Him and hear His answers to the questions that you ask? Okay, we have all the catechism, we have all the knowledge, and maybe we even need to learn more and to read up more about this knowledge of religion. But do you hear Him and have that personal contact with Him in your prayer? So today let us ask for this grace of prayer once again, not just to pray about what we should do or how we should do things, but in the midst of everything ask, who are you, Lord? And maybe that deep answer coming from that question from our hearts will give us a better perspective already of what we should do in our daily lives.